All right. And hopefully, this open office hour, we want to do one of these a quarter. And, some of you guys who are dialed in and you made a list of questions, it's just easier because some of you have repeating questions that we get from other people. So instead of like copy and pasting and, giving you a little bit of different perspectives, we're going to do these ones and for our ArmCare Elite members. So there's going to be an ArmCare Elite webinar. We're going to do something on the strength and coordination lens, an open office hour. And we started something today that we're going to have all these mini webinars because there's so many questions that come up on social media that will be pre-recorded and you guys will have access to. So lots of information, that's for sure. So let's see, Jordan, how should we, if you guys want to put your hand up, because I know instead of calling everybody out, and I think I can, yeah. And I'll just answer questions. One person goes and then next. So Kyle goes first. I see his, and then.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
So hopefully I'm going to try to give you some softballs here. Here's two quick ones.
Okay.
So for SVR, what max velocity would you guys recommend using? Is it the one that you think that they most are going to most often do, whether that's what position they play or actually like off the mound, or would you consider more of a shuffle pull down?
Yeah, good question. I'll answer it just for me, what I do with my athletes. It depends on the player. So if it's a pitcher, I'm definitely wanting to get a max reading from the mound. The reason why I want max over average for me is that's telling me what is their ultimate capacity. So, a lot of times pitchers are going to have a compensation that can sometimes accompany a max velo pitch. They might reach back further, they might counter rotate. I just want to know when that thing comes out of their hand, what's the max velo for that. Now, when it comes to a position player, for me, I like to have them throw out of their position, whether it's a shuffle step for like a shortstop, having the pocket radar behind them, or a catcher, getting a good feel for those elements is how I would scale the pounds per miles per hour. I don't know if Jordan, you do anything different with your guys.
Very, very similar. I generally look at my guys from that pull down because most of our throwing is going to be done in a throwing program, and that's where a lot of our throwing does. So I'm trying to prep for that highest velocity, most use case scenario. There's some guys like I know Flint, you'll probably run into guys that you've worked with that don't like to get out there and long toss and they don't do pull downs. Like there's a couple names that pop off on the top of my head. One of them was just on a World Series team. I'm sure it's going to pop into your head here too. Ryan, I won't use the name, but he's a left-hander that we had.
Okay.
Did not like to do pull downs. So for him, I'm going to use mound velo because he doesn't do the pull downs. So kind of case by case dependent, but definitely for a position player, I do from their position, which most of the time kind of turns into a pull down anyways.
I think the one thing, Kyle, is that try to be consistent. Like, for example, don't, go with the mound for one guy and then decide you want to do pull down, because then it's going to be hard for you to look longitudinally at that change, because now you're influencing some confounding variables. He's got momentum, he's got kinetic energy into the throw. Some people want to go off the run and gun. It just depends. I just think, being consistent and choosing what you think works for you. I like things close to game speed, game positioning. That's how I use it.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that as well. Just keep it consistent for whatever it is you're using, and you're going to be all right.
Particularly with what you said, Jordan, what is your throwing program exposing them to is really important. And then to what you said, Ryan, not flipping within that individual back and forth. You want the consistency. That's helpful.
Right.
And then the second, hopefully softball, is there, we emailed probably about a year ago over the ArmCare specialist course. What needs to happen for the dynamometer to be able to measure rate of torque development? Is the tech already in there and it just needs to be unlocked, or is something missing and you're going to have to sort of update the actual tech and replace it later? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah, short answer, you guys have to do a better job of marketing our company so that we have the finances to create that. In the dynamometer, it samples at 100 hertz. It's capable. The problem is there's some heavy computing at the back end whenever you're doing rates of something, it's physics. So you're looking at some kind of quality that changes by time. And what we want to really be able to do is incremental rate of torque development. So we have the ability to look at the total time to peak, but that's not really representative of a true rate that's, I think, meaningful for the game. So, you know, we have to look at sampling from 50 milliseconds all the way to probably 150. You're going to capture at least what happens for most players when the foot hits the ground into ball release. It's about 100 at the longest. It's like maybe 150, 200 milliseconds. We want to look at all the incremental elements. And it just takes money and time to put that into the app. However, it is necessary in the sense that one of these webinars, I'm going to get a student of mine to go through his research, which was fantastic. He defended his master's yesterday, looking at the statistical impact of strength on ball flight metrics and also on like traditional stats. The thing is we now have to look at another layer, you know, in the strength and coordination element. Is now we're looking at, you know, how quickly you're executing force. And because we want it individualized, we have to also build in measurements of the segments so that the torque values are going to be also individualized to the body sizes, rather than just a flat, you know, force divided by time. We want to look at, hey, my arm's this long, this is my lever system, this is how quickly that I can develop this force. And it is going to have much more of an association to velocity, where max strength, what we had seen with our data at the college level, had a really strong correlation to innings pitched. And also it was inversely related with balls per nine, walks per nine, walks per inning. So accuracy, what we're shaping the lens for, and I really want to, I'm excited for the next ArmCare Elite, because I want this student to talk to us about this. Maximum arm strength has an impact on sustainability, injury prevention, but also accuracy. It's important for that speed accuracy trade-off. On the other lens, we use the Biodex, and if you guys are familiar with that, it's a very sophisticated piece of equipment, and it's, you know, it measures the amount of torque you can produce at different speeds. And so those guys that can produce a lot of force at 450 degrees per second, or maybe it was 300 degrees per second, it was very high anyway, those are guys that threw faster. So we know we need rated torque development, and we know it's going to further advance the performance end of velocity potential. But you got to, I mean, we need you guys to get more money in the door. We're you know, we're a small company, and, you know, it's
So long story short, the dynamometer can do it.
It can do it,
but it's going to cost us about $300,000.
Yeah, it costs money. We want it. It can do it. We want it. We need to have an explosion here of people, you know, wanting this device and wanting the same thing. So Flint, you had a question, buddy. I see your hand.
Yeah, on back to Kyle's thing on the SVR, the velocity you put in, would it make sense to put in like their running gun or whatever if we're in an off-season training aspect, and then when we go to in season put their mound one in, because we're doing it, it's different workloads, different what you're trying to do, different adaptation you're trying to get to? Just a question, just the thought.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, this is the beauty of this is why I like the ArmCare Elite, and maybe it's easier for the questions because not as many people attend those, or or get some time to think about them. But you're showing different use cases. I mean, that's the thing, is you got to make it your own process that makes sense for you, and that does make sense. You know, you're adapting where they're capable of throwing, or when they're ready in a throwing program to be on the mound, and you're taking those benchmarks before. You know, a lot of players are doing online velo enhancement programming, where, you know, that the bullpens I don't think are happening till, you know, really late. And that's really what they have to count on. I mean, you gotta do the best case scenario and the one that makes most sense to your programming. So yeah, another one, Flint.
No, that was just that was my question for the group, if that would make more sense, because we all know the running guns are the velo is gonna be up for vast majority of guys compared to the mound. So if you're using what their mound was during that time, may not be the best thing to keep them healthy while they're going through the velo part, right? And then when the season comes in, I know it'll be a little less, but it's also a different workload capacity that's usually happening during the season for a guy. There's usually a lot more overall workload on the arm. So the velo max, that strength to velo ratio probably would be for what they're going to handle at that point in the game, in the season. So it gives us a way to fluctuate that throughout the year for the guy because they're going to, I believe they'll fluctuate between off season and season from what I've seen as well. So
I agree. Maybe too, I mean, because some of you guys might have questions at the same time. It's probably easier maybe in the chat. What do you think, Jordan? If you type it in the chat, because I don't want to miss anybody's, and sometimes I'm talking, I'm not looking at the hands going up. So if you guys
now there's been no others.
Yeah.
We're on task force. So I think either way is working right now.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, guys. If you have any more. I'm telling you, we have an hour. So if you got questions, Kyle's got one.
I'm back. I'm the guy that emails you guys way too much, and I feel terrible about it. So, in your last video, you talked a lot just about just the full foot being on the ground, a lot of that. And the thing that it made me think in my client population is, a lot of my guys are so undeveloped that heel comes off the ground, at least what appears to be early to me. And I'm wondering if you can kind of give me a guide, so to speak, of how I might work through that. Just like if I'm learning to be a baker, I follow the recipe exactly as it is on the box. And then as I get really competent with that, I'm able to manipulate the ingredients, right? And so there's part of me that feels a little uncomfortable with knowing what's the general rule, and then how can I then branch off of that when looking at the foot contact and the ankle interaction with the ground when I'm looking at a video. And so I guess my question would be, at what point do you start to see that heel coming off the ground, or at what point do you have sort of like a general rule? Again, we know everybody's individual, but how might you start down that path to go, yeah, that guy's like losing contact with the ground early. And then how do you individualize that for guys with different plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, inversion, eversion, and even IR, ER guys, because how their hips are going to interact, you might see different things as well.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's awesome because we have Flint on here, Flint Wallace with the Rockies. And I spent some time talking to him a lot about lower body function and, what certain guys do. I spent a lot of time looking this year at 3D data with my athletes, with my consulting business. I actually farm them out to labs and they put markers on them. So it's highly accurate. Then what I do is I archetype them. I look at, are they anterior chain, meaning is their first movement to load knee towards toe? Okay. Or are they posterior chain? Flint really described it well as having the back pocket of the pants beyond the heel, guys that want to go behind. And then I look at their center of mass relationship. Are they aerial? Are they guys that want to stay high, maybe more drop and drop, or more tall and fall? Or are they guys that are more drop and drive? They like to get, I call it terrestrial. They're kind of common motor preference terms, but getting them closer to the ground. And then I basically have to look at certain things. Are they a speed skater in the sense that when their lead foot hits in terms of foot flat, do they have like an H position for me? Like the knees are bent and they stay through that through ball release, or are they a pole vaulter where they get a lot of knee extension and they raise up even higher again? So all of these different interactions, they impact the propulsion component of the drive foot. And remember from that scrum 2, the 3 things you got to worry about. So you have dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, that's propulsion. Okay. Inversion, eversion is direction. Okay. Then you have what we call the ground reaction torque. So basically how they're rotating, creating rotational force of the ground. You have internal, external rotation of the foot, which is closed chain. That's friction. Okay. So you have all of those things. Different motor preferences are likely selected based on ankle mobility. Some players that are two-way players as kids, I noticed that they have bone spurs in their ankle joint. There's just certain, and I had that too. So there's just certain bony obstructions that they can't get to. Generally, guys that are going to not be able to hold dorsiflexion a long time. They may not get to a long time in inversion. So as they're going down the mound, their shin dropping towards the mound, they can't hold that position. So those are guys that are going to come off the mound. The thing is like people always ask, and they ask Jordan too, I'm sure, what is the best way to pitch? And we've seen certain players that are able to create a lot of ground contact. You see that their back foot is loading on the ground for a very long period of time. That's called impulse, right? When you get them on a force plate on a mound. And then you also see guys that they do have a pretty sharp vertical ground reaction force, meaning they're popping themselves off the ground. They're not riding, they're flying. That's your aerial guy. And they kind of get to the same place. We're talking about elite athletes. Now, with your group is kind of similar to Jordan's group, and I'll let him kind of speak about, what he teaches, the drive ankle and staying in contact. Directionally, it maybe is better for them to be more terrestrial, lower to the ground, right? And maybe more posterior. It's possible. I just see guys that they're able to create a lot of ground contact because they can stay in dorsiflexion and they're holding loading for a while. So I don't know, Jordan, if you wanted to talk to it in terms of the ideal pitcher.
Yeah,
it's hard for me because I first have to look at what do they prefer to do? Do they have pain and poor performance? They're performing well, no pain. I generally don't go in there, but if all of a sudden, man, he's losing accuracy or his stride length is contracted. That's a big thing. If you start seeing like an inch, 2 inches on their average stride length, or maybe 2 or 3% body height change in their stride length, something is going wrong with how their ankle is propulsing and interacting with the ground.
So one thing on that too, I know I've sent you a couple like before and after videos of some of those kids that I'm working with, and the younger the athlete, the more I try not to pigeonhole them into a preferred movement pattern, because they're going to grow, they're going to change. They're probably not strong enough to even be in a consistent movement pattern to begin with. Very common with a lot of the young Latin American players as well, to where sometimes they're going to be, more kind of like you're drop and drive. Sometimes you're going to be tall and fall. They're going to vary between those. And a lot of that comes down to a lack of functional ability, functional strength when it comes down to it. So I always like to make sure that they can go 2 legs, stable training. So not on any kind of unbalanced platform, especially for the younger they are. And then single leg on solid ground, doing those same exercises, same movements, building stability, making sure they can do that. That usually gets them to the point where they start getting into a consistent movement pattern on how that back foot's going to peel off. I remember we were in Louisiana, me and Ryan, and I had posted a thing on social media on LinkedIn. And I had one guy who was very toe dominant and one guy who was very full foot, kind of heel push, peel dominant. And I said, which one of these is your better pitcher? And everybody's getting in there and they're like, the guy who is, loading in through that glute, who's doing all these things, he's doing this. This is why he's better, because he does it this way. It's like they legitimately have the same WAR. They legitimately have the same career innings pitched. They have the same K per 9. They're the same guy. Just one of them is more glute based, and one of them was a little quad based. So the older the athlete gets, the harder it is to say that we need to or the easier it gets to say this is their movement pattern. The younger they are, what I've noticed is you need to spend more time on building that base so you can actually get some form of consistency of movement, and their brain's going to start putting them where they need to be. So if that doesn't give me a lot of consistency in there, then I start moving into unstable training where I'm using balance pads, balance boards, double leg into single leg, different things like that. And that usually starts cleaning up the way they load. So I sent you one of the guys. He's a sophomore in high school this year who started out very, very quad dominant on his loading. I didn't do anything mechanical. And I was just sending Ryan these before and afters where we started doing a lot of single leg work, jumping single leg, force absorption, different things like that. And then all of a sudden he becomes a very glute dominant loader without me having to say anything. So it took a little time, like roughly, 10-ish weeks or so, but he also gained a lot of velo during that. And we was just teaching his body through strength how to move with consistency. So I think that answered your question.
I want to give you guys like a little visual and some throwing drills that I prescribe. Another thing that we haven't
Kyle, was I on the even close to the right track of answering your question, or did I go off
this
the
is
rails?
No, this is what I appreciate about you guys.
Because I don't know if I went the rails.
No. It was actually, I'm very glad you went the direction you did, because I see the same thing with my young kids, right? Like, I basically don't touch a kid for like 2 years in our program because they just change so fast, right? Like, I just see kids whose mechanics change drastically, not because we do anything right, but because they grow up. And I think the other piece that you hit on big and that I appreciate, and I would love to hear both of you just kind of finish with, is, both of you speak in ways that seems like you have training in, and I know you've name dropped, guys like Randy Sullivan and Franz Bosch, understanding ecological dynamics and not overly cueing a guy and trying to create environments and constraints and affordances. And so I really appreciate that. So that would be kind of my final question, is maybe even what I'm hearing you say is what we're doing, right? Like, get the guy stronger on 2 legs, 1 leg, unstable. Is there anything you do within the actual throwing program beyond just blending some of those strength-based exercises with mound throws that allow you to see those movement principles transfer a little bit quicker, if that makes sense?
That's what I wanted to show you.
Perfect.
Because yeah, I want to dovetail on what Jordan said. He's also in kind of, he didn't say it specifically, but a lot of his transition between going bilateral to unilateral, it's to promote some ankle stiffness, because you have to create the stabilization. But one of the things I'm gonna pull up one of the drills, but I'm hoping you guys can see this. These are
and then
some.
After you answer this, Ryan, Han had a question as well.
Yeah, I see Han's got a couple. We'll get to him, but hopefully this plays. But I like to blend drills where I'm creating some stiffness on the reverse leg. Like, we're so used to having our drive foot on the ground, that doing reverse, I'll keep playing it, doing these reverse type of drills, that ankle has to create at the point of impact stiffness to transfer in the opposite direction. Okay. The other thing too is that I'm overplaying gravity. This works well for a guy who is terrestrial. Okay. Which meaning he likes to get low to the ground. He needs stiffness and center of mass low to the ground. It's very challenging for an aerial pitcher who likes to be high. They're not used to having power from this low. Okay. Just their joint angles. But you're also creating what's stiffness. And I'm not in cleats. I bet you, and I'm throwing off a wall in my backyard, but I also think you're probably going to get further doing these kinds of drills on grass in cleats with grip. So there's so many ways to blend, the art and science of all of this, that you don't have to feel limited by traditional drills or traditional strength training. You can kind of go in places where you think, oh man, I need to challenge the ankle to decelerate, but I want to challenge the ankle to decelerate while coordinating a throwing pattern. Right now, you could go, I go to places with athletes, like putting a vest on them. I have a lot of wearable resistance clothing I suggest for my athletes, that they can wear it and they can over exaggerate their absorption. Like, if you put 2.5 pounds on someone's trunk, it's adding to the effect of stabilizing the ankle, and it's got to then transmit. So there's a lot. Jordan, you had a ton of drills. We could probably do a good webinar for the ACE community on just on hybridized drill selection. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have that too. That's really what we want, is you guys to share that stuff and take the load off of Jordan and I to present. But yeah, man, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat for the ankle, and I think ankle stiffness is important too. Not just having a lot of loose ankle motion, because that's what transfers force, not being a wet noodle. So you said Han's got some
Yeah,
questions,
yeah.
right?
His question is, so it sounds like he's got a a guy that he has a partial tear in the UCL, and he wants to know if
Okay.
they should be using ArmCare at the same frequency. And he's got an 8-mile-an-hour drop. Sounds like, I don't know if there's still pain there. So Han, if you don't mind putting in the thing, if this athlete's still in pain, are they cleared to throw?
Yeah.
Because obviously that context is going to be important. But go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, for me, most of the athletes I work with are surgical cases, usually multiple surgical cases. And my rule of thumb, depending when I get to them, some guys are way deep into the throwing program, but I like to see them, as soon as they're going to pick up a ball, I like to see them doing a fresh exam every single day. So every day I'm going to be able to, and a post exam when they throw. So I'm able to see what is their strength going in, what's coming out of it. Right. And this allows me in the people I work with to be more, and Jordan works with me in some of these cases, to be more dynamic in their progression. Like, for example, we had a player, didn't do any fresh exam, picks up the ball, throws, doesn't know, but like, it was 5 minutes and 90 feet, and he lost more than 20% arm strength. Okay. And so that's obviously someone that needs to be regressed. So when you have the data, you don't have to stick to a doctor's protocol. I think that it doesn't work anymore when you have an athlete say, hey, this is where we should be. You're actually further along, and you progress them because they're not in pain. They're not having poor performance. You've improved their strength and length. You're monitoring. And if you get them to a point, you're like, wow, he lost more than 10% of strength in this throwing day. I need to scale this back a little bit, leading up to the next one. Your programs, Han, should be like waves. And most of the time, what happens with throwing programs and rehabilitation, they're like staircases. You're going to throw longer. You're going to throw more. You're going to throw harder. You're going to throw a further distance. And what happens is that's called exponential periodization. And that's in our courses. You've taken them. If you have taken them all, we talk about that workload scheme where you're increasing the number of throws and the intensity throws together. And it is essential when the athlete has had a compromised part of their body that in their return to performance stage, man, you got to crank out using the app. You got to monitor them. You got to talk about it. And really be open dialogue with the athlete, because they're going to be hell-bent to want to get back on the field. But you got to say, hey, brother, you are not functioning well at a low level. I mean, we had, like, Jordan, I think we went 60 feet. Didn't we go to 60 feet for 3 minutes, right, of throwing?
Yeah.
It was so small because the kid needs
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah. He needs to throw. Like he needs to start to get mobility back in the shoulder joint and move, coordinate throwing. But even still, he was losing 10%. And then finally we started getting to a rhythm of strength and throwing, and he's able to now, build it back up. But you have to make sure you're using it pretty often. Yep.
And I believe Han's question there also was a little bit about, if he keeps using the dynamometer, will it contaminate the data because the values are lower because he's hurt? And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember from the specialist course that some of the numbers are like comparing you to who you were in your last fresh test, and other ones are more like a 21, 28-day rolling average. So even if it was, quote unquote, contaminating the data, at some point that as he gets more healthy and the numbers go up, those rolling averages would sort of get back to normal. Is that correct?
Right. It's a rolling of 5. So imagine you're going to have even stronger data during the period of return to performance if you're taking his information each day. You're going to have less gaps. But you don't ever want to lose data points. If he's lost strength and you have this is why you're doing it right, Han. If you have his strength prior to getting injured, so you kind of know what were the problems there, okay? And now you have where he's at a low level. You really return to performance should be return over performance. When they're going through this return to performance period, you want them to be stronger than they ever have. A lot of athletes that I see, generally when they're hurt, they have shoulder imbalances. They are really, if it's an elbow, they're really strong at the backside of their body. They're so weak at the front. And I look at their programs like, what the hell, man? You don't even do
Real quick on
IRs.
that too. In the portal, when you're in there, you can filter within those individual players based on date ranges on the graphs in the portal. So if you only want to look at the last 30 days, the last week, you can do custom date ranges. Or, if you really want to look at data and maybe you pick up some trends within your population to where when you see guys that start to show signs of injury, and I know we filmed a couple things on that we have on social media somewhere, on an athlete that I was tracking how he was gaining strength, and then all of a sudden it starts going down. And that's a time where Ryan was talking about those throwing programs and those wave loads, undulations. That's when you'd want to start deloading that guy and bringing him back up. But you can filter on those. So if you know that he was hurt on, November 1st, and now it's November 14th, and he's able to start throwing, you can start your new filter set from November 14th and on. So you can customize those date ranges so you're not going to taint that data. And then you can also keep those CSVs for the big picture or for the small picture of it as well.
So another thing, kind of a heuristic. I don't like most of my athletes are pros, and I'm assuming that you have a lot of pros where you're at. I don't like guys that throw over 90 coming back to throwing a baseball until they hit 100 arm score minimum. And in all our benchmarks, I try to get them 3% above it at least. Like if they're just hitting 20 for internal percent body weight and 20% for external and 15 for long lever scaption and 15 for here, that's not good enough for me. So, I want at least 23. I want 18 and 18 before I'm saying, okay, pick up a baseball, because when you start to integrate a baseball and strength training, it gets really complicated because now you have like this sound mixer. You're dialing up one, okay, to dial down the other. And you're going to have to do this constantly if you're seeing that the strength isn't there. So it's better to get, okay, I'm here. I've hit this level. I gotta stay there at least and try to expand it. And now I'm slowly introducing my throwing program. So those are great questions. Okay, he was torn. Okay, not broken. Okay, so it sounds like he had a repair, maybe. Difficult. Okay, yeah. The miles per hour, it will come back up if the return to performance program's good, the arm's strong. I can't stress it enough. The athlete, before they go to pick up a ball, in my opinion, they need a secondary MRI. Like, I think if you're capable, if your medical system allows it, definitely if you're with a major league team, it's something to be afforded, is to have a secondary MRI. So my process is, okay, you get the MRI reactionary. Okay, he got injured, and now we go through the return to performance. He's picking up a ball. I want another MRI on the arm, and it's not fun for the player, but it's like, has the ligament, like, does it look good? Is there is still inflammation or edema? You're trying to get information on that. It could be ultrasound. If that could give you some information, you got to have some baseline too, if you can. But then when they're about to go back into competition, I want to see that again, because the worst part is the secondary surgery. Like, your chances of competing after a primary injury, not so bad. If it's a Tommy John shoulder, not as good. But if you're having a secondary injury, I mean, you're treading on thin ice. You're losing tissue and changing different graphs that you've used or different strategies to keep your arm together. I want to make sure, hey, this guy's going to go out to a minor league team's going to do, 2 games here and 2 get. Now he's got traveling, and sometimes the teams are all over the place. I want to know that ligament when we're letting him out there. Maybe he's not sensing pain, but I want to make sure that's in a good place before you extend him, because it's not if you're in the pro world and even in high school, when guys go to compete, and they're back in competition, it's kind of like, we're not developing this guy anymore. We're not continuing the rehab process. You're a reliever. I got some of them, they are wanting to go back to back. They go like, there's just no lead in time. So understanding comprehensively you're seeing in strength, what you're seeing performance wise from the athlete, but you're looking at the tissue, it gives me at least more confidence. It gives you more confidence to kind of push this athlete along. If he's ready to deploy and he still has, like, if they're looking at ultrasound, he still has a lot of joint gapping, like the muscles haven't really helped that, and he's really getting looser and looser in the middle of the elbow joint when it should have narrowed. You got issues. You're probably going to have secondary problem. So he's got a second question. Are different from pitchers. Okay. I mean, Jordan, this is a great question for Jordan, because he's doing this right now. He's got position players, pitchers, and two-way guys.
Yeah, so obviously what kind of got me introduced to the monitoring of the two-way guy was when we had Ohtani. And that would kind of set the basis for it, but it runs basically the exact same. If anything, I would say the arm primer becomes more important for the position player. From my experience, that might sound strange, but it's because they just get so many unaccounted for throws, and they'll do their throwing program, and that throwing program may be 6 or 7 minutes if you're a position guy. And I mean, Flint, you've seen it. It's all 30 orgs. It's like, hey, position players, let's throw, and all the position coaches lean on a fungo. And then as soon as they're ready, it's like, okay, we're good. But then the pitching coaches for the pitchers are roaming around, and they're making sure everybody's doing what they need to do. The position players are just kind of like, hey, go get them. And then they go into infield and they start throwing across from positions. Or maybe they go do BP and they've just kind of swung and done everything, and they're taking ground balls during BP, firing balls across the diamond. There's a lot of unaccounted for throws that, to me, that arm primer takes a higher priority than it does even for the pitcher, because the pitchers generally fall into really liking that fresh exam, from my experience, whether they're high school, college, or pro guys. And usually the position players, they all have a minute every day to do that arm primer. And if it says, hey, do what you were going to do, kind of let them do what they need to do. But if it says to decrease, don't let them throw across. Save the throws for the game. And if I remember correct, Han, you are working on the pro side with a team in Shanghai, if I remember correctly from our previous conversations and emails. So in your context, I don't know how many games a week you guys play. If it's similar to the KBO or whatever it may be, where there's, I think they play 4 or 5 games in a week, to where then those BP throws, they're not going to be thrown across the diamond. Maybe they skip the infield. Maybe on bunt coverages that day for your team D, they just don't throw, but they field the position. So they're able to start doing those things and making sure that there's not any overthrow issues. Because one example, we had I won't say the names just to not do. We had a short second baseman who I had in high A as well as throughout other places, and he got to the big leagues and he killed it. But his big issue was always in the second half of the year. During BP, he wanted to just throw across the diamond, throw across the diamond, throw across the diamond, throw across the diamond. And I'm a true believer that if he would have been using that arm primer on a regular basis, he over fatigued himself on the throwing side, which impacted his hitting. Because all of a sudden it's like, you don't just start swinging at balls over the middle of the plate. He would. So it's very important for the position player. Jump in there, Ryan.
Yeah, sorry, man.
I was getting on a long-winded tangent.
Every time that I get excited because someone just reached out to me the other day about position players, and I'm starting, like, there was a first rounder that somebody wanted me to talk to, and he's had a shoulder injury. He had a slat tear, he's a cross-hander. He's an infielder righty. He hits left. Okay, so he's both sides, but he's one of those guys that after contact, he's got this very long finish and poor thoracic mobility. So you got to think that arm's going way behind him. And he had a peel back mechanism slap tear on his throwing arm, hitting, which is a problem, right? So you have to do this. You have to do it with your players. I'm going to show you something else because I was in this study. I helped write it. And I want to go to the stats. Okay. So this is return to play because I'm big into the elbow injuries, right? Like Tommy John is my deal. It's where my passion is that. So return to play and competitive outcomes after ulnar collateral ligament reconstruction. Okay. And MLB players, this is a systematic review. I'll go to the results. Okay. So there are a lot of studies we looked at. So return to same level of play, okay, was less frequent. Okay. This is in pitchers. Okay. 67 to 87% of MLB pitchers returning in 15 months. That's pretty amazing because right now it's 18 months for reconstruction because guys are throwing so hard, and it's better for a repair. But the RTP rates, which is return to performance after revision, okay, are lower. So you don't want to have a secondary, okay, 77 to 85%. But I want you to look at the position players, catchers, 59 to 80%, okay? They had lower RTP rates. Infielders, only 76%, 89%, okay? So for outfielders, our position players aren't coming back, as well. There's way too much of a question mark. So, with you and your teams, building a process that you're screening position players, like Jordan is afforded the opportunity to have a lot of two-way players. So their pitchers, they're getting that testing constantly. But at the pro level, people might look at the optics of arm strength testing and say, hey, this is a pitcher thing. We don't have to care about that. Well, think about this, guys. If you lose a good catcher, especially one that has very high catching extra strikes, meaning they frame the ball well, okay, and you lose that guy because of an arm injury, you're going to see, remember we talked about strength and coordination decision tree, you're going to see a real big increase, okay, in pitches per inning, which is our pitch efficiency ratio. I saw it with a team that brought me in to look at their injury data, and I said, well, look, you're catching. The frontline catcher got hurt. The away low corner where the glove is going this way, the secondary catcher could not frame in that position. He was amongst the worst. They went from the best to the worst catcher in the lower bottom corner of the strike zone to a righty. So to a righty, the guy couldn't handle that lower corner. So now their pitches per inning went from like 16.4 to 17.1. And you don't think that's a big number, but 17.1 pitches per inning is a big jump when you compound that by all the throws they need to make and all the pitchers. This is an overall average. So you don't want to lose your catchers. And I remember with the Angels, we always talk, Jordan, about strategies like, hey, if we're getting all these first round arms, these college arms that, they've already been used and they played 4 years in a row from summer and back to the team, why are we not drafting, even if the lower scale levels, the best defenders we can find and have those defenders go with them? Because I'll tell you what, man, you get a shortstop that's good defensively. Now he's not in the picture. Again, the overuse risks for your pitchers are going to go up. They have to. Defensive play really has you're going to get more runners on second base. That's the name of the game. You lose a catcher that can throw, it could, you're going to probably see more track meets happening. We saw a lot of catchers that couldn't throw very well that could hit,
especially with the new rules.
Yeah. You don't want to lose a position player because it will they're coming. It'll be coming back to your pitchers. That pitches per inning, man, is serious, and it's not just accuracy. A lot of ours, the first couple of these webinars that we've run, these ArmCare Elite scrums, we're really focused on that strength coordination decision tree and the pitch efficiency ratio. And we're talking about mechanical elements, arm strength position elements. Think about the effect of your teammates really making it a hard time for you to keep runners at a scoring position, which is definitely going to heighten, your your adrenaline, your effort levels, your cognitive fatigue. You're going to see guys like with the pitch clock, right? We talked about the pace today on a short webinar that we talked about, like what can you visually see in a pitcher that could clue you in for fatigue. Now you got a timer, and you got players in a high leverage position because you got a shortstop that has a 980 or a 970 fielding percentage or something that wasn't supposed to see the field when your Gold Glover had a shoulder injury, or elbow chips or something. So it's important to test them too. I know I ranted about that, but I'm really, people are looking at us in the wrong lens. It's like, you play baseball, you throw. And if you're a good defender and a team loses you, oh boy. So, Kyle, you got another question? Your hand's still up.
You bet.
Okay.
I got plenty, right? No.
Okay.
Well, first off, a lot of talk about medial elbows there. And just a props to you guys. We had a young man with some medial elbow pain this fall after our summer season. And actually, from where Flint was at for years, Texas Baseball Ranch, we always started with pain and did some blending with some holds and socks and throws. And we had a little luck, but he always kept having pain when he got to a certain weight and a certain percentage of effort. And so we just attacked it like crazy in the weight room with I had just finished your specialist course. And so, FDS stuff, forearm stuff, bicep, we just went after it like crazy. And by the end of the fall, he was able to throw 80, 90 pitches and felt great. So just props to you guys, first off, because that information was so helpful to be able to apply. My question is, I've asked you guys before about holds, and Jordan, you've really helped me understand, how I might program those best. Maybe just like confirm that I have this right. When you're programming holds in an effort to try to affect change on the strength front, you're probably my understanding, and just correct me if I'm wrong, is that guys kind of have that ramp up phase where they're not throwing at max effort yet. They're getting their arm after they've done their entire warm up. Doing the holds at less than max effort will not get you the strength gains. Like if you're looking to program holds, those should be, again, you can tell me I'm wrong, I'm just making a statement, those should be basically done as the main portion of when you're ramped up, obviously, and when you've built enough of a base. But those should be done at max effort, and then you talked about testing afterwards. But am I getting that correct, basically, that just doing some holds while you're ramping up is probably not going to affect your strength? You need to be doing those at max effort.
Ryan, you want to take that? I know you have some eccentric paperwork on that, or do you want me to go?
Well, I mean, I'll let you go first, because you got deep experience, and since meeting you, I've really dove into this stuff. So you can go ahead.
So I think it's important to note what you're doing with a hold as well. Are you doing it as a strength training aspect, or are you doing it as just kind of like a part of an activation? So there's two separate things, just like how we have bands from 3 to 40 pounds on the crossover side. Excuse me. And if you're trying to just activate, then maybe that 3-pound band is going to be great. But if you're trying to strength train, that 3-pound band is not going to do what it needs to do. So you need to also kind of have the idea of what you want to do with the weighted ball hold. And while weighted ball holds get a lot of flack because people say, well, it's not a perfect arm path that you're going to do. It's like, well, I've also never seen a pitcher bust into a pull-up, but I can tell you that a pull-up is probably going to help most guys when it comes down to it. So understand the difference between like the perfect arm path versus I'm building strength through a range. So obviously give and takes and everything. No such thing as a perfect anything. So what I like to do with them is if they're just activating, like if I have a guy that he wants to do some of those holds just to keep himself loose, some guys like that, it's going to be at a low intensity just to keep that arm moving. If they're using it as a strength builder, because I'm trying to fix a shoulder imbalance, or use it as part of a training program, just to kind of blanket statement this, a 30,000 foot view, it's going to be as high intensity as they can hold onto the ball. So naturally, when those guys aren't strong enough, it's going to come out of their hand. And I always say, if you're having trouble hanging onto the implement, tone it down a notch and keep slowing it down until you can hang on to that with comfort. and then build in as you go. And you'll see
Do you
like
mean
with
tone it down based on intensity or based on
intensity. Yeah.
the weight you're using?
Intensity. Yeah. So the
Okay.
implement, you can use that implement. So I always just use volume, load, frequency, intensity, time, and type. VL fit is a very easy way to adjust whatever it is. So when you're doing those holds, they are building the eccentric phase. So it's a different type of eccentric phase training. So it doesn't mean I'm going to do that. If I have 5 throwing days scheduled, it doesn't mean I'm going to do that 5 times. Maybe one day it's going to be the band. I don't know, Ryan, one of the last ones you showed where you're starting out here, getting into that position and then working the eccentric phase back. That might be Monday. And then Tuesday may be hold, build that aspect of it. So it all just kind of depends on how you want to do it. But I always let the athlete know, get to the highest intensity you can without being uncomfortable hanging onto the ball to where it feels like it's going to fly out and sling over to your glove side. Does that make sense?
That's perfect. Can you just get to Flint's question here, but can you just repeat the volume, intensity quick, and then get to his
Yeah, it
question?
just I think the training principle is called VL fit, right, Ryan? Volume, load,
It's fit.
frequency, intensity, time, type.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Frequency, intensity, time, and type. Those are all things that you're gonna adjust. Yep. Volume, load, frequency, intensity, time, and type.
Yeah, and on a side note, I think, and again, if people can disagree, and I think it's good to have disagreement in a healthy manner, hopefully. But I think that's one of the keys to building a throwing program is VL fit. Is too oftentimes, we were talking earlier how it's just a stepwise. Is we're just building this in a linear manner as opposed to adding in different implements when necessary. Some people, hate I know there's the thing that you like wrap around your wrist and you throw it into the saw. Some people hate that. I think everything has a purpose to a certain extent. It's like, I see value in that. You're changing the type, you're changing the volume, you're changing intensity, you're changing feedback with it. So there's always a purpose behind everything.
One of the things though, if you guys have taken the specialist course, and we also have it in our velocity enhancement, data-led velocity enhancement course, like how to use our case studies and the technology for that. The one thing that you'll find with weighted ball holds is that they have a lowered amount of torque, okay, relative to just throwing, which makes them really safe for a strength tool. But what they do that I don't think any other drill does is they increase your biceps eccentric torque. So your bicep is actually going to have to work more in stabilization than regular throwing, which I think is pretty amazing. So when you have these elevated like flexion torques, the bicep crosses to the forearm. The bicep crosses here and also at the shoulder. It's a biarticular muscle. It is the best. So the FDS is the best stabilizer for the forearm as it relates to overlaying the UCL. But the bicep is the best stabilizer of the inner elbow. If you looked at a cadaver studies, and they've done a few where they cut the bicep, the whole elbow falls apart, even though all the muscles are integrated. The bicep's really important. We talked about it today, even with a player who had an olecranon fracture. The eccentric bicep training is important, and the holds, you got to look at them as a training, like a strength drill, not a throwing drill. People are like, oh, it blends too much with throwing, and guys start pushing the ball. It's a strength drill. It is going to gain strength pretty quickly for the athlete, and then you want to consider taking our velo enhancement course for understanding what the light ball will do and the heavy ball and the progressions of those things with the app, that will give you more context, into that. So Flynn had a question, right? Flynn's hands up.
Yeah. Going back and talking about when we were talking about the ankle and how it works and everything, I agree. I agree with that. Is when would you change a guy's movement? Like if you think if he's moving an interior chain guy, but
Good forward.
Yeah, when would you change that? If performance is down, if there's pain, if there's he can't throw strikes can't gain velocity. What I mean is that when we step in and try to switch into another way.
Well, yeah. So that strength and coordination. Let me pull it up real quick because let me get to it on the course because it gives you the flow chart. I don't know, you've been in a major league season, so I doubt you've had a ton of time to go through the courses. But there's a flow chart to making that decision. Okay, let me go over to it. Okay.
Yeah, I think I finished the ArmCare one today. I got to dive into the biomechanics one this week.
So the biomechanics is all about this. It's really understanding the strength and coordination decision tree, because you're talking about when do I alter a motor preference that athlete has, right? The first thing, if there's no pain or poor performance, right? You're just maintaining strength and length. You're making sure that everything's optimized there. They're performing well. They're pain-free. It's not really where you want to go in and adjust things because they might not look right. But like what you're talking about, hey, velocity's off, command's off, anterior shoulder pain, whatever may happen, it's like, okay, the 72 hours of recovery gives you some chance to start working back on strength and length. You'll start making in 72 hours, if you're concentrating on strength training and not throwing, you're going to make some improvement. But once you have these things addressed, it may take you a little longer. Do you need any further adjustments, or do you go on to this rung? Okay, so let's just say you've optimized strength and length again. Okay, but he still performed bad when he was doing what he was doing, and you have an idea of what you want to do. You need some data around understanding if you made the right decision. Okay, so this is the strength velocity ratio. If you're doing something with the athlete, you're making a decision on, let's just say you want him to sit back more. Okay, let's just say that's what you're trying to do. And all of a sudden his pounds per miles per hour goes down. You've now led this athlete into an injury risk. Okay, so you've actually weakened his arm relative to velocity. That's not good. Okay, so you have to make sure you fact check your decisions, because the athletes that I work with, we sit down and ask them all their mechanical changes in 2 seasons. Some of them fill up 2 pages on a Word document. It's like insane. So you have to optimize that. Okay, and hopefully your change is increasing the pounds per miles per hour. So now their arm is getting stronger and their velo's getting stronger, or it stays the same. The other is you're looking at your pitch efficiency ratio. So you want to look at the bullpens, and I like, some bullpens have pressure, some don't, but I like charted bullpens where the athlete gets feedback on how accurate they were. I mean, the technology's there. We even had, I got some players that will throw their bullpens on the Kinetrax at their stadium and with their Hawkeye system. So they really can determine, is this change allowing me to have command or not, before they even get to competition. And then the biomechanical efficiency ratio, if you got the 3D data, which, I'm very rigorous with mine. And like Flint, you're in the pro world, and I think we can get a lot better in all walks of baseball, is I want to look at their torque, their miles per hour per unit of torque that's relative to their body weight. If my change is, well, if it's lowering velocity, it's probably not good. If it's increasing velocity and increasing torque, that's not great, because I haven't made a big improvement in their loading efficiency. But if their velocity goes down and their loading goes up, we got a problem. And the other thing too that you guys can do, because you got the grip strength, that's just one feature, is that once you get the torque, you can really take a look at what is their pounds per unit of torque for their forearm strength. So if I can get their elbow torque, I can really understand how strong they are relative to my elbow torque, which is important, because if you're making a change that's driving down grip strength, okay, let's just say we're talking about that particular muscle group, and velo's going up, well, all of a sudden your stress shielding ability, your muscle's ability to shield the ulnar collateral ligament goes down. And this stuff is not checked in the game, and I don't like it. So that's why I like you guys taking the course and saying, hey, I'm a smart guy. I'm going to fact check it, because trust me, Jordan's made mistakes. I've made mistakes. I've seen just too many athletes get injured because we don't do the fact checking. And then there's a correction algorithm. So Flint, talking about where do you go to improve these things? And then one of the things I do look at with biomechanical efficiency is drive leg loading. I do, because I understand, if, let's just say, I don't buy enough time for the arm to get into external rotation, if athletes aren't getting around 45 to 60 degrees when they land, it can drive up loading. Sometimes guys that are anterior chain, they want to go to the front. They don't really have, they don't have a long stride length. They might be tall, but they might not really get out there. They're getting extension from just their arm length. If we contract their stride, that might affect things. So I look at the drive leg for sure. But you have this safety range where you're talking to the athlete and you're saying, hey, I'm not a magician. We may have to pivot, but these are the factors I'm taking a look at, because I want to make sure you check out in that manner with the things that we're doing. That's why with technology, man, we don't have to guess anymore. And then you can start, you think about, how can I improve these things? So you might even find, when these athletes have pain and poor performance, and you're looking at these data, at least a few of them that are in your grasp, you can say, holy heck, that was bad to begin with, and I can fix it. But if you're monitoring, you're getting strength and length out of the way, you're not having pain or poor performance. Once you get these numbers in a good place, you're going to be able to go and stabilize them again, because you're going to know, okay, I know, like, his drive leg is coming undone. Like, he can't sit back. Maybe he's got quad fatigue, or on the lead leg, he's starting to absorb too much. So, like, in one of the webinars, I showed you an athlete that after foot contact, he sinks even more. So he's like, you can tell there's something wrong with his stability in his lead leg even. And it could come from his ankle as well. Like, it's not firmly planted. He goes into dorsiflexion because that allows him to flex his knee. And then he's got to be abrupt with plantar flexion again. It's like he's trying to load the pole vault again. Like, this is your sequence of events that you're going to learn how to navigate, Flint.
Yeah, perfect. And just curious, I don't know if you've dove into this much yet. Is there a certain type of mode of preference guy that tends to get injured, that has more injuries?
Well, it's tough, because when we were at the Angels, they had this biomechanical model that was developed by a true rocket scientist, someone who is really a rocket scientist from the Johns Hopkins lab. Jordan was involved in digitizing. How many pitchers, Jordan, in that model?
I mean, we went from like 1990 draft all the way through 2017, 2018.
Yeah. I mean, there's over at least 1,200 pitchers in there. And they were compared to, and a lot of them had high school footage on MLB clips that could be compared to what they became in present day, like the Cy Young Award winners and all that kind of stuff. And we came up with the biomechanical model. And I'll never forget that when I looked at it, I said, okay, he clicks a button, and we had, they were you looked at the deliveries, they had a lot of components that we think is very clean, arm timing, all these things happened, trunk flexion. So there was, athletes were able to create much more of a sequence forward into throwing. There were all sorts of things we looked at that you could identify in 2D. And we used this model, and we drafted all these biomechanically elite pitchers by this 1,200, like, it was a huge model, a lot of pitchers. And lo and behold, the majority of our injured list were made up of high performing pitchers on that particular projection model. Okay. And I knew it was a problem, because there's only been one study in the history of the world that's ever connected biomechanics to injury. And when you look at the injury, it's like 10 pitchers, 3 of them had surgery, and then like 7 of them had conservative injuries. And the guys that got injured actually played more. So there was like there was all these confounding variables. Like they had more years of playing. Of course, they had more wear and tear, that the biomechanical approach wasn't the way. And this is where I love the Angels. When I had a chance to go to some teams, I went to the one that had the most arm injuries in the league for 2 years. The first year we went after range of motion. So we made everybody a loose mover. We still were the worst in the league with injury. Then the next year we went for this biomechanical model. We wanted the biomechanics to reign. And so we were starting to, we picked the pitchers and we were changing. Remember, Jordan, we put them at different places on the mound to line them up better to the target, less rotational pitching, all sorts of things that we had done biomechanically. Lo and behold, we were worse. Now, we weren't as bad as the teams today. We've seen some horrible elements, like double digits out of the major league team having surgery, but we were bad. And then we took in dynamometry. We said, we are going after strength and we are going to be doing individualized arm care. And then, you know, our injury reduction was tremendous. We had no surgeries for 2 years when we did this with the major league level, because we created custom programs, and guys through all different ways, from like your Noe Ramirez, like slingy guy, you know, to your over the top dude, you know, there, we had all sorts of athletes. The only one, the big dog, he didn't really want to test. Unfortunately, there was, you know, the MLB level, if you guys aren't familiar, they can, you know, they can tell you this whenever they want, right? And we don't want to push it. But one of the things that if you got a player like this, and we tried, test their opposite arm, because if you're seeing at least strength loss in there, you tell them, hey, you know, okay, you don't want to do your throwing arm, you don't, you know, you're worried about it, or you don't want us to know the data on it. Let's look at your non-throwing arm, and let's see if you're losing strength in that arm. Please try to provide effort for that. And then what you're going to find is, if you're seeing strength losses in that non-throwing arm, that's central nervous system fatigue. He's definitely got fatigue of the other arm if this one's showing fatigue. Okay. So that gives you something, but they threw all sorts of different ways. And I worked the hell out of Jordan. I mean, I'm so grateful, because he was not only digitizing everybody's motion, like each inning, there would be I think it was the fastest fastball we digitized for every pitcher in the organization on one day, right? Each inning. And
yes, that would go off of pitch types. That would do everything with it. Yeah.
Yeah. We look at pitch types. We look to see, is there a change in lean? Is there a change in forward flexion? Is there from behind? Is there a change in arm position at foot flat? We looked at so much, man. But the one thing,
shin angles and everything.
Yeah, shin angles. But the one thing that Jordan killed was taking this strength data from a very sophisticated, super expensive piece of equipment we had that we can only do at home stands. And he would give it to me, and I would start farming out all the different individualized arm care programs that had to be done to our strength staff and to our minor league programs and major league programs. And I worked alongside a really good sports medicine director, and it made a big deal. So it's really tough for me to say one way over the other, but I always use this pain and poor performance. When I see that, I know something's up. Okay. And then I go first here. Let's fix the arm. Let's fix the range of motion where it may be restricted in most cases. And then we have this other layer of what did this look like? And here's where I need to, I need to take a fix on those elements.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, listen, guys, we went over, this was a lot of fun. Again, keep coming to these scrums, keep coming to these Q&As. You're giving great information. For those of you who really have stuff that you want to share, we want to make you interactive with our webinars, for sure, even with this small community of answering questions and giving your feedback, but we want to put you in front of something more formal where I have my animations that we can kind of talk about things that you're seeing. You guys could flash drills. We can make you a panelist, get involved here, because we want, the faces of the ArmCare elite, and not, just Jordan and mine. So, really thank you guys for today for joining. And this will be up on the ArmCare Elite Education So for those of you, if you haven't been added, please get a hold of me. You should have all access. Anytime we do a scrum, anytime we do one of these these open office hours, they should all be there for you guys to utilize after you've taken the courses, or while you're taking the courses. You might, get some other visuals that help. We're just going to keep pushing this forward of having all these ArmCare Elite experts. So thanks, guys.
Appreciate your time, Ryan. Thank you.
All right. See ya. Have a great day.